I didn't set out to write a book about the loop. I was planning to write another book about Chicago. I had this idea, blah, blah, blah. But I realized in order to write this book about Chicago, I would have to clarify for my own, to be able to say it in the book of how the downtown got named the Loop. And when I was at the Tribune, we had written about this once or twice. And because growing up in Chicago, everybody knew the downtown was called the Loop because the elevated train went around the Loop. However, since the 1950s, historians who were sure they knew better than Chicagoans were telling everybody that no, the downtown was called the Loop because of a cable car loop from 1882. That just didn't sound right. And I asked experts, and they said, well, no, I don't think it's right. But they couldn't prove it, because how do you prove it? Well, I realized there was a way to prove it. And what I did was I spent a long time reading thousands of Chicago Tribune stories. I use the Tribune because it has a complete collection of its papers going back to the 1850s. There's a number of other papers that were in Chicago at the time, and some are available for this time period, some for that. But so you can't get I was afraid of getting an apples and oranges thing. Whereas if I looked at the Tribune, I could see exactly how the Tribune was reporting when they were calling the downtown the Loop and when they weren't. To make a long story short, that involved realizing, having to research the cable cars and how they developed, because they created loops, and that's how the idea for a loop was adapted for the elevated trains. And the bottom line is that if you read thousands of Tribune stories from over that period, as well as some from other papers, you find that the downtown was never called the Loop before the elevated loop was built. At the same time, it was not called the Loop when the elevated loop was built either. In other words, it wasn't an instantaneous, oh, we're going to call the downtown. What I realized was that the elevated loop was this physical thing that if you were downtown, and I knew it because I've been downtown, if you're downtown and a train goes by, you hear the screeching going around the turns, you see it above your head. If you're walking underneath it, you hear it chattering over you. You see how the structure turns, does the shadows on the streets below it. It's just this very imposing physical thing, and even though it's dinky, it's only 20 feet above the streets. It's dinky compared to, say, the Willis Tower or whatever it's called now. I'm not sure if they've changed the name, or the John Hancock Building, or any of these other big buildings. But in fact, if you're near a skyscraper, you're only seeing the first floor. You have to, lean back to look up, and even then, you're just looking up. I mean, it's when you compare the visceral impact of a skyscraper to somebody on the sidewalk, to the elevated loop, it's nothing. The elevated loop is just so much more imposing and intrusive. If you're on a phone call on Wells Street and the train comes past, you have to stop. Hold on, I've got to wait for the train to go past. So anyways, this physically imposing thing. In addition, all the real estate people and all the business people knew, even before it was finished, that whatever was inside the elevated loop was going to be more valuable than anything outside the elevated loop. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that was this concentrated all the activity, the business activity, in one place. And so it was real clear if you had a building outside the elevated loop, you couldn't get as high rents as you could if you were inside the loop. You couldn't get customers to go there as easily. I mean, what the focus of the elevated loop made it that all these people were mingling all around with each other. So you wanted to be in the middle of that. You didn't want to be on the outside. And I've got some stuff in my book about the Siegel Cooper building, which was um, the lighter building, but I think it's the lighter 2 building, and that was outside the loop, and he had to give cheaper. He had to give financial considerations to people who were going to go into that building because he couldn't get them to pay the top dollar. So what you had was this physically imposing thing, and this thing that was delineating an area that became extremely important to Chicago, and the center of all of its or the vast majority of its financial power, its economic power. So what happened was the elevated loop gets finished, and quickly people are referring to the elevated loop in order to say where things are. And so there's a progression that happens where people would say, oh, it's within the tracks, it's within the elevated loop tracks, to say that it was in that area. And then it evolved to that it was inside the tracks, meaning inside the tracks, and then it was inside the loop tracks, the Union loop tracks, and then that was all kind of clumsy, so it got changed. And when I say these things changed, nobody decided it. It's just the way it happened. It's thousands of daily decisions by people and what they're saying. So eventually it came to be called, well, it's in the loop district. Okay, it's in the loop district, this district that is encircled by the loop. And then it was just one step further of, why say loop district? Why not just say loop? And so the elevated loop gave its name to the downtown by about 1911 or 12. The ironic thing, though, is that even though the elevated loop gave its name to the downtown, so it was the one who owned the name first, the downtown, if you're looking for if you hear a reference to the loop, it most likely means the downtown, not the elevated loop structure. You know what I'm saying? It's this thing of, people talk, I'm going to the loop. They don't mean specifically the elevated loop. They may be driving there. They may be Ubering there, whatever. But so the irony is that if you're around the world and somebody says the loop in Chicago, they know you mean the center of the city.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking about the elevated loop structure. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question.
Very interesting. So 2 questions in one. How many times did you ride the L while doing research for the book? And was any portion of the book, and you may not remember the exact number, but for that first question, but general. And was any portion of the book written like while actually writing on the L? Like, did you ever take notes while you were on it or anything like that?
I have been riding the elevated loop for at least 60 years, probably longer. And so in a way, I was researching from that moment. In other words, I was never planning to write this book, but I was riding the L all the time. There's stuff in this book that comes from my growing up. There's a description of one kid, one 11 or 12-year-old boy who was downtown with his friends. We used to go downtown and just play around. We didn't have, we wouldn't have money, just go and hang around Sears or Marshall Fields and get chewed out of there. And anyway, there's this one boy who's described there, and his friends ditch him, but he's okay because he has a quarter to get on the the L to go back west to the west side to the Laramie station because he lived near Laramie and Washington. Well, so he gets on the L and he's riding it for a while, and then he realizes, well, wait, I'm not on the Lake Street L. I'm on the Ravenswood L.
Oh
So
no.
he gets off the Ravenswood L, and he knows enough about this. He doesn't know the city like a map, but he knows enough that he can walk back downtown under the L, under the Ravenswood, to get downtown, find Lake Street, and then head west. And that's what he did. He walked all the way back to Austin, the west side, 7 miles or more under the L tracks. And it's my brother, and he's coming in the back door, and we've been looking for him, and the cops are out, and they're thinking, has he been kidnapped? Has he been killed? And he walks in the door, and my mother says, why didn't you call and say you were lost? And he said, well, I wasn't lost. I knew where I was. And really, that's how the elevated loop was part of our lives. It was this thing. It was part of our it was a playground for us.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it became the way to get to work. You take the L downtown, and if you work downtown, you get off there. Anyway, so I've been researching it all my life in that way. So once I got started on this, I didn't have to go and learn it. I just knew it. It was in my blood.